episode of The Lounge. I have a repeat guest with me this time, Rachel Lyons, who is a dear friend and fellow woman in the aerospace industry. Rachel and I did our first episode last year talking about leadership in the space industry. Rachel serves as a rising leaders who are ready to fulfill their unique visions for humanity. She's worked with leaders from astronauts at Virgin Galactic to program directors at Blue Origin, engineers at Rolls-Royce, founders at Series A startups, influencers with hundreds of thousands of followers, and successful CEOs just embarking on their space journey. As the former executive director for Space for Humanity, Rachel led the first nonprofit in human history to send civilians into space. She actually supported sending 6 commercial astronauts, which is amazing because that is definitely a dream of mine. She's woven strategic partnerships across the commercial space sector with organizations already mentioned and many more. She's been featured at many events worldwide, including CNN, Vice, ABC News, PBS, and Business Insider. Rachel, it's a pleasure to have you with me here today and talk about how you help visionary leaders, not just in what they do in space, but how they're making our world a better place. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. It's such a pleasure and an honor to be here with you, and I'm super grateful to get to share with whoever is tuning in.
Yes, absolutely. So, the last time we talked a lot about leadership, and a big part of leadership is using your voice to help
Hmm.
inspire and enroll people in the greater vision. Now, we
Yeah,
understand this in the context of organizations, but there's also that personal vision that a lot of people tend to forget about, or they maybe
yeah.
haven't updated it for a long time. So, let's start the conversation there. When you're working with your own vision, how do you tie this in? How did you arrive here now? What was it that brought you to the work that you're doing today, coming from the background that you've had?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, there's just an interesting, doesn't quite answer the question that you asked, but just an interesting thing about vision. And really, when my own work and my own ability to create and my own ability to like manifest in the world transformed was when I was working with Space for Humanity as their executive director. I was like a few years into my role. I was dealing with challenges that were bigger than like what I knew how to deal with. You know, it was like it was very big and I would say like for me at the time it was scary, and like how do I manage this, how do I speak on stages, how do I manage a team, how do I do all these things. And the real shift for me began to happen when I learned how to embody my vision. And so what I mean by this is a lot of times I would say in people's most intense points of career, they'll like hire support. So like I hired a coach, and she was amazing, and she helped me a lot with a lot of different things. And one of the things that she supported me with, as well as like, in my own life, I really got a sense of is like, what is my vision? And it's not just at the time sending people to space. Like it's like if I'm sending people to space, what kind of world does that create? Like what world am I contributing to? And so it's like as you get clear on what kind of world you're contributing to. So for me, it was always like a more loving world, a more loving, compassionate, harmonious world where people are happy, where people understand the context of our existence. People understand that we live on this interconnected, fragile, beautiful planet. And so then in order to embody that, so that it's not just a mind thing, because we're obsessed with the mind in our Western culture,
Yeah.
you bring the body in and you actually let yourself feel like, okay, I am creating this more loving world. I'm sending people to space so that more and more people on this planet are happy. It's like I let myself feel the things that I'm creating. And then that's actually how you begin to transmit your mission and your vision right now. So that's how you can bring your vision to existence right now. And it's simply, it's not by sending people to space or whatever your mission is. It's not by making the thing happen. It's actually by feeling what that leads to and letting that like transmit from the way that you be in the world.
Yes.
And so that was when things started to shift for me, was when I let that happen rather than like we oftentimes we let the unconscious and transmit. So it's like if my thought patterns and what I'm feeling is like I'm scared, or I'm freaking out, or I don't know how to do this, then like that's sort of, whether they know it or not, that's what people around me are feeling.
Right.
And so that conscious shift can make, infinite difference when you're speaking on stages, when you're leading teams, when you're creating partnerships, when you're doing whatever you're doing. And then also in being able to strategic plan, like in deciding like, okay, what's the next move for this organization? Where are we going? If you have like a bunch of fear in the background, it's going to be actually more challenging to create something that's like aligned,
Right.
versus when you know your vision, you feel like who you are and what you're creating, then your strategy can be created from that place. And
Yes.
that's when it's like true magic.
Oh, yes. You just echoed something that I was revisiting this morning with a client of mine where it was, they were very much in this mindset of, I need to have this thing and then I will do this thing and then I will be successful or worthy
Mm-hmm.
or enough or powerful, whatever word it is. And that's just the wrong order of operations. And so when we start to flip the script and we act, we're being the thing already, then we're doing different things because we're in that state of,
Mm-hmm.
I can do that, right? And
Yeah.
then because we're taking action and we're already in that state of the result, then we're human beings, right? We're being in the body. Then we
Yeah.
actually get the thing we're after. But so many of us have it the other way around. And I remember that was a really key turning point for me and my own mindset and how I approached my goals, how I felt successful when I actually achieved something. Because for so many years,
Yeah.
I would do all these things and, get the accolades and whatever. And then it would be like a dopamine hit. And I'd be like, okay, what's the next thing? Now I need more. It needs to
Yeah.
be bigger and greater. And I never felt
Yeah.
like it was enough because I was always like, it's the arrival fallacy, right? You never arrive because you're constantly chasing.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And I've worked with, in my own life as well as in lives of clients that I've worked with as well, it's really interesting for me to see how our subconscious beliefs always, like honestly, always, and I don't use absolute terms, but always manifest our reality. Obviously,
Yeah.
there's things that can happen that aren't related to subconscious beliefs, and like that's fully true. But, someone who their subconscious beliefs are, I'm never going to be good enough, or I'm never going to be good enough, or I'm not smart, or
Mhm.
whatever, which a lot of times we have these things hiding under the surface, then that's going to manifest as like them doing things that prove that correct. Or on the other side is them doing everything that they can to prove that it's not true, but it's never good enough.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting if you get to know someone enough, you can actually look at their life, and oftentimes you can sort of guess what their subconscious beliefs are.
Mm.
And a lot of people can be critical of like celebrities with egos,
We all have egos.
and yeah, we all have egos. And but the interesting thing is that these are people who, like, if we're talking about that specific archetype, a lot of times they're very confident in themselves. They know that they deserve good things. Like maybe they have like a sense of self-importance, and because of that, when you have that, you're not afraid to go out in the world and to create a reality that reflects that.
Right.
And so it's sort of like a what came first, the chicken or the egg, with those people.
Yeah.
And I think oftentimes they likely grew up with that sense of confidence and self-importance, and so then that allows them to go out and do big things in the world.
Absolutely. And, it's so true that whatever your internal state is reflective in your experience because you can have two people in the car. And one of my coaches used this example before where, you're on your way to Disney World, right? And you got two kids in the back. And one kid is, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? And just like, when are we going to get there? And they're complaining and it's so long. And I want to get there already. And the other kid is like, wow, look at those trees. Oh my God, did you see that? And they're enjoying the process of getting to the place. And so they're having a great time, whereas this other person is miserable, right? And that's what we do as adults as well. So we can learn to enjoy the process and we can embody these new ways of being. And it might feel clunky at first, right? I know the first few times that I had to shift into a different energetic state that I wasn't used to being in, it was weird, right? It just felt awkward, and I had to practice and get comfortable with that discomfort, and just then I realized like, hey, nobody even realizes anything. Like I can just go be myself and add this thing in. And one of the most powerful things to help me with that was how I dressed or did my hair or my makeup. Like it was a powerful way to step into something new, right? And the way that we choose to show up, that we can almost have like a uniform, if we will, for the confident speaker, or a uniform for the empathetic healer, right? And then by wearing these different things, then we can step into that energetic space a little more easily.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's a lot that you said that brings up so many different things for me. The first thing is when you were speaking about the child who's in the car wondering like, are we there yet? Are we there yet? And then the child who's out there like looking at what you're passing with awe. It's something like people can take a step back and ask themselves the question like, what is your relationship with life? Like what is the recurring experience that you're having. And I can share just from my own development.
Yeah.
There was a breakthrough that I had towards like the beginning of my personal transformation journey when I realized that I was addicted to suffering. Like I was addicted to the thought patterns in my mind of suffering, the like questioning of if I did something wrong, like the shaming myself for the choices I was making. Like literally I was addicted to my own suffering.
Yeah.
And that was a really interesting thing to see. And honestly, to see it, it's like, I think it's a Carl Jung quote. It's like when you make I made the unconscious conscious.
Yeah.
And that's what actually gave me the power to begin to transform it. And then a few years later, I had this realization that I was like perpetually dissatisfied. Like sort of like nothing was ever good enough,
Yeah.
which is also it's like a mirror. If you look at life as a mirror, it's showing me my own dissatisfaction with my own self, my own dissatisfaction. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whatever, with myself, with life. And so that's, and so you can see it changing throughout the years and there's different layers to it. But yeah, I mean, life is, I would say that if we aren't holding a magical, expansive and inspired view of life, it's a practice, like
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that I'm always in that place, but it's something to like, go inside and be like, okay, like what do I need to shift my perspective right here? Yeah.
I love that. I
Um,
just took some notes. Can I make a quick comment before you continue?
yeah, totally,
Okay.
totally.
I love that you recognize the like addiction to the cycle, because a lot of people, especially working professionals, are addicted to stress, and they're
Yeah.
addicted to that like overcoming the difficult thing and solving the problem at the last, like the 11th hour, right? And they feel this surge of adrenaline and like satisfaction, but then we're chronically burnt out. And so that's something to be really cognizant of. But there can be other things that we're addicted to, different energetic states and emotions and feelings. I was similar in that I was addicted to overcoming something. So if I wasn't struggling and having something to overcome and like prove how strong I was, then there was a problem and I'd probably create chaos to have a struggle. Thankfully, I have, like you, made that more conscious. So before I really make it bad, then I start to recognize what I'm doing and go, okay, hold on, what's going on here? But the life as a mirror is really powerful, because a lot of times we, as humans, like to tell ourselves a story, and we have this narrative and justification for why things are the way they are. But when we really look at the experience just simply being a mirror, that can help us dive into our emotional state a lot more. So I thought those were really powerful. And then the last thing, the layers, it just brought me back to Shrek. Like ogres are like onions, but so are humans.
Totally. I love that. That's so good, Sarah. Yeah. Yeah, and the life is like a mirror. I did not come up with that, but it's true. You know, if you oftentimes when you look at your external world, it's reflective of what's happening internally. You know, if
Mm,
someone's like perpetually dissatisfied in their relationship, yes, there could be things to happen on with both parties there, but and the number one thing that you can do is take responsibility for yourself. You know,
yeah.
take responsibility for how you're showing up. Take responsibility for how you're feeling. Take responsibility for how you're caring for yourself. And that's something with my clients, you know, so often, and I do this too, like people will bring things and it'll be like all about the other person. Like, oh, I had this like, you know, this fight with someone and they did this and they did that and then they said this and it was just so annoying and now I feel like this. And that's just not and I always say like they're not in this session right now. They're not here. You know, we can't do any work on this person from this
Right.
seat. So like what can we do for you to for you to have more responsibility in your life, for you to have more power in your life, for you to have more like sovereignty and more like aliveness or whatever it is that you want.
Yeah.
Because it's not, they're just, it's like not about this person. Sometimes a conversation does need to be had, but ultimately it's about you reclaiming your own power.
Absolutely. Yes. And
Yeah.
responsibility is something that whether it was taught, and we inferred it from the environments that we are in, like growing up, at school, at work, the CC on email, nobody has responsibility because it's just like, well, there's
Yeah.
50 people on there, somebody will do something, and then nobody does anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
But showing up powerfully and turning that lens back in on yourself and treating life as a mirror, I think is such a powerful frame, because that can help us to language. You said, "What do I need?" Right? So many people can't
Yeah.
answer that question,
Yeah.
but by being able to language that, then you can use your voice more powerfully, which is what I know we're going to be diving into today.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, it's all related also around using your voice more powerfully. But this conversation makes me think about I was working with a client who was having trouble letting go of their ex partner,
Mm,
and and there was a lot of guilt around how they showed up. You know, like guilt for like some guilt and some shame, like
yeah.
guilt because I didn't do this enough, or guilt because I didn't do that enough, or shame because I yelled that one time, or shame because of this. And we went through and I said, okay, what can you be responsible for here?
Mm,
And so we went through and they said, like, I can be responsible for um like being I'm making this up, but like being harsh. I can be responsible for um and also good things too. Like there was some things where it's like were growth opportunities, but then there's also like I can be responsible for giving that relationship my all. You know, I can be responsible for like loving this person as hard as I possibly could, you know, and I can be responsible for like losing my temper and not addressing things early enough. And so going through like and actually making a list of like statements of like I am responsible for blank.
mm,
I am responsible for blank. It actually transformed in less than an hour, probably more like 10 minutes. It transformed the guilt and the shame into power because
mm.
then you're owning your peace.
Absolutely.
You, yeah,
100%. Yeah. When you own something, you take the power away from other people, being able to use it to manipulate you or, you know, pull on the emotional strings to, like, you're now this marionette that's just being moved around because you're trying to please everybody or take take over their sovereignty, right? When we try to make other people feel a certain way, that's disempowering for both parties because you're actually saying, like, well, you don't know how to regulate and you don't know what you're feeling, so I'm going to tell you and I'm going to make sure that they're okay. But we don't
yeah,
like it when people do it to us, right?
no, yeah,
So it's
totally.
yeah, it's such a powerful thing.
Yeah, yeah, you take the power away from other people and you also take the power away from your own shadows because
Mm,
we all have them, you know,
yes.
and like even just like guilting yourself or suffering or needing to overcome or you know whatever it is for you. Um like you're taking power away from the things that aren't actually like the truth of who you are, which is
Absolutely.
someone who is brilliant and loving and, and bright and good. Like that's, I believe, the truth of who we are.
Mm.
And so any of those, like, I call them like shadow behaviors, which we all have. It just takes like it fractures you, like you're being
Yeah.
fractured out another direction. When you come back into that center place, like that's when you can actually, yeah, be responsible, and even to the point of like creating your own reality. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's when you realize that you are the creator of your own reality, and you being in touch with your magic, and you being in touch with your power, and you being in touch with your vision. Like that creates moment to moment in the world, and people will respond if you choose to be in touch with those things at right now at this moment.
Yeah. It's powerful. And you know what's really funny? I love the synchronicity of the universe. This morning I wrote a poem
Mm-hmm.
inspired by I'm reading Nightfall by Isaac Asimov.
Mm-hmm.
And other short stories. So it was just sitting like next to me and I saw the word nightfall. So I wrote a poem about night falling. And I expressly dove into how, like, when the night falls, do you run from your shadows or do you embrace them? And then here we are
Yeah.
having this conversation. So I just got goosebumps.
Yeah.
That's great.
I love that. Yeah, and that's the thing too that I've been in like study with myself about for many, many years is the number one thing that will hold us back is being at odds with ourselves.
Mm,
So like,
yes.
if we have whatever, like addictive behaviors or addictive thought patterns or just like tendencies that aren't really serving us,
Yeah.
the number one thing that we can do that will keep us stuck is like hating ourselves for it. Is like shaming ourselves for it. It's like being like, oh, Rachel, you're doing that thing again. And so for me, one of the things that's brought me the most freedom is exactly that. It's like embracing them. It's like, there's so many ways that we can do it. We can look at these patterns as if it's like a child and be like, I
Mm,
love you and it's okay that you're doing this. It can just be like, being like bringing some lightness and being like, oh, you're doing that thing again. Like, okay, great, we're doing that thing. Like there's a whole way of you can do it, but like actually embracing it and choosing to love it as a part of you, like as if you are a child who's just doing something silly, is like the number one thing that we can do to really give ourselves freedom from
mm,
any of our learned behaviors. And all of this is learned behavior, whether we
yeah,
know it or not. It's all learned behavior.
absolutely. I read something the
Yeah.
other day actually, and I believe it was the emotion disgust.
Uh-huh.
Prior to the age of about 5, we do not experience disgust because disgust is
Really?
actually a byproduct of social norms. So
Oh,
when we're
interesting.
younger, we're still not aware of social norms of, like, oh, if you're not wearing this, then I can't associate with you, or if your skin's a different
Yeah.
color, or if you don't go to this school, or whatever the silly little thing is,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it's only when we start to become aware of those social norms that we then express disgust. Now, I
Hmm.
remember thinking, like, well, we see babies like spit out broccoli or whatever, right?
Totally. That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
But that's not disgust. That is just displeasure. That's just like, oh, I don't like that.
Oh,
So
interesting.
they're very honest about it, right? Like babies are so honest about their expression in the moment because they don't know how to self-censor. And they
Yeah.
just, they're tired, they're hungry, they let you know, right? But then
Yeah.
they start to learn, oh, it's not okay to express this, so I have to hide it, I have to
Mm.
censor it. And then we also start to learn, like, oh, we don't like that, gross, because someone else told us that we shouldn't like it, or we watched our parents react a certain way. So it's a learned behavior.
Mm.
So it's really fascinating to start to understand what is natural, which is the love state, like you mentioned when we started, and all these
Yeah.
other things are
Yeah.
just learned. So, which means we can unlearn them, which is great.
Yeah. Totally. But and the thing about unlearning them is, uh, I don't even know where this came from. I feel like I probably hear it everywhere, but you need to feel it to heal it.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so that's the thing too, is if you really want to return to that love state, I mean, you can. like meditate and get glimpses of it for sure.
Yes.
There's other ways and practices and things that you can take part in that will help you glimpse it. But what I'm most interested in is like how do we return to that space? And the way that I see it and the way that I've learned it from a lot of different teachers and mentors and people who have supported me is like, yeah, like us in our center, us in our truth is us in that love state. And then we have these things along our along our life, and also like passed down and what we're born into, that it's almost like it's like little like I picture it as like little like knots of energy, like little like just like contractions and like in your body or around you. And in order to heal it and release it, a lot of times we need to feel it. We actually need to go into like that like tension in our neck. And like sometimes there can be emotions that are stuck in there, and like you need to let those emotions out, and like so that your neck begins to release, and that your body gets a little bit more back in center. And that happens like it can happen like emotionally, it can happen spiritually, it can happen physically. I mean, probably even mentally, though I think that actually my like guess would be that comes from it's all interconnected.
Right.
But yeah, so it's like we undo these knots that are like sort of like these old patterned ways of being, and it can serve us in all of those ways, and then it gets us more and more closer to that like center of truth,
Yeah.
center of love.
Absolutely. I love that.
Yeah.
It's so true. I used to hate feeling. A lot of people don't like feeling the harder emotions or the heavier emotions,
Yeah.
right? Or the uncomfortable, what we deem to be pleasant or unpleasant, and then we go
Yeah.
from there. But when you look at like the emotions wheel, actually more than half of that wheel are what we would deem as negative or unpleasant, and it's because
Yeah.
that's what we're wired for, right? It's for survival and
Yeah.
for these different things.
Yeah.
So when I first started to feel, I remember it was like the dam had been opened and just like all of this energy was coming at me, and it was a little overwhelming because I had suppressed. I was a very successful suppressor, but only successful in the sense that I did it for a long time and it was very tightly like held down. But then that meant the pressure built up. So when the dam did break, it broke pretty spectacularly, and there was no like putting your finger in the dam to hold it back. It was like there's no
Yeah.
repairing this. But
Yeah.
now I'll feel something and I'll be like, okay, this feels like sadness or it feels like anger, and I'll let it flow through me. And I might cry literally for like 10 seconds. And I'm like, okay, that was all that was needed. Now I can move on to the next thing.
Mm.
Or furiously scribble or whatever I need to do, yell, get it out. And then it's like, all right, that's moved through me, gone. Now I have more space for something else to happen or for me to go back to, cognitive function or whatever it is that I need to do. But the more that I try to not do it, particularly if I'm at an event or around a lot of people where society like norms don't allow for that, or you have to hold it together because maybe you're the one leading something, then later it takes longer for that to process, right? And that's okay. I mean,
Yeah.
that's life. You're not going to always be in a situation where you can like in the moment immediately shift or be conscious that
Yeah.
is actually happening. But the
Yeah.
more you practice, the easier it does become.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. And it always like needs to be processed somehow. Um, and I think there's no better way than feeling your feelings, but I'm open to anyone listening. If you have other tools, feel free to
Yes.
share.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um,
Share them, please.
but yeah, I had a similar story, Sarah. I also was a very great suppressor and like literally like never let myself cry. And then when I was like, I don't know, maybe 21, I was in this women's group that a prompt had me like touch that dam, and then the wall just released, and I was just like it's like I cried all the tears that I hadn't cried for the past 15 years and over the course of like 2 months. And so it was intense, you know, and I've had sessions with clients where we touch that, whatever that is, that, you know, it might not be as big of a dam, but we break through some wall, and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm crying and I don't know why I'm crying. Like, am I okay? Like, what's wrong? And I'm like, yeah, this is beautiful. You know, you're healing, you're letting go. And so also like when we have these moments, doing our best to like let go of it needing to mean something. You know, wisdom will always come, you know, like deeply emotional moments will always lead to wisdom, you know, will always lead to, you know, greater ability to support people who are going through hard things, you know, like greater wisdom around like what you want and you don't want in your own life, you know, like greater wisdom around like what you love and like being there for the things that you love. If, and oftentimes if we're like in the middle of it, if we're in like the release of it, letting go of a story, you know, like it doesn't need to be anything. Your body's just doing what it does. It's like a child, like these things that children do, like a 3-year-old, you know, like crying and throwing a fit even, you know. And it's like I've had friends who say like they express their emotions like they're breathing, you know. It says it flows as easily as the breath, and that's actually something that is a skill. And we don't need to lose that skill. It's actually a beautiful skill that keeps us healthy. And so it's like we in our society, in our culture, and also through like you know, being raised by our parents who also grew up in this culture. You know, there's a lot of like stigmas and norms around emotions, around how we feel them and what's okay and what's not okay, which leads to like things being suppressed or, you know, things coming out backwards. You know, like anger not being like used in a healthy way. And so then it comes out really unhealthy in aggressive ways. But actually like emotions at their core are like a form of intelligence. It's just that we're out of touch with that intelligence, and so then it comes out in ways that can be like destructive and unhealthy. And so like letting yourself use these practices, like Sarah, like what you said, sometimes I'll just share with clients, you know, if you're going through like you have a lot of pent up anger and resentment, put on like 2 angry songs and like I'm not even joking here, like punch a pillow and like let yourself scream and shout for 2 songs, you know, do it like 3 times in the next week, and they come back to me and they're like, oh my God, I feel so much better. And all of a sudden, like this person that was pissing me off is pissing me off so much less. You know, and so that them actually releasing it in a healthy way lets it so that they're not like being super resentful to this specific colleague. So, you know, they're not having like outbursts in the workplace. And so, yeah, we can do this in a healthy way. And as we become more and more well practiced in it, we can, it's like you said, we can just let it move when it needs to move, and then we can turn it off when it's time to turn it off. But it's like, it can be as easy as breathing.
I love that. I actually wrote that down because it should be as easy as breathing, and it can be if we allow it to be. And my word for the year is allow. So I wanted to write that down and be like, yes, allow it to be as simple as the breath. Like we all know how to breathe. It's natural to us. So just allow it to happen, right? And what
Yeah.
you said about feelings being a good indicator. I mean, it's literally data, right? So for our engineering friends out there and our very type A analytical people, you know, our former selves as well, or our alter egos when we get into the mind, it's simply data to give you an indicator of like you're in alignment, you're not in alignment, you're safe, you're not safe. You know, this is something that you agree with or don't agree with. And so the more in tune you become with that, the easier it becomes to then use that data usefully rather than, you know, hiding from it or ignoring it and pretending like it's wrong and then, you know, having the explosion or implosion.
Exactly. Yeah. I had a therapist that I saw like 6 or 7 years ago say that anger informs boundaries, which is true. Like anger, if you process it healthily, it can actually just have you see, okay, I'm a no to being spoken to like this. You know, I'm a no to whatever it is that just happened here. Like I'm a no to whatever. So anger informs boundaries. Grief shows us what we love. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like grief brings us in touch with how deeply we love something. And like there's nothing more beautiful than that. Like
Yeah.
grief helps us like um find love in the healthiest of ways.
Yeah.
Grief is a beautiful emotion. People are really afraid of grief, I think, in our culture. And
Yes.
grief is something that helps us just touch how deeply we love something. Otherwise, we're literally avoiding our love.
Mm. Yeah, you're just reminding me as well. And one of I don't remember if it was when we were both being the TA group leads for Space Kind or if it was a different one, but one of the other TAs comes from an Indian heritage. And so she expressed that she remembers as a young child that I think it was her, someone in the family died. And then her mother and her sister like went into the bedroom and she heard a lot of crying and screaming and yelling. And it was a process to release their grief and their anguish and like process the emotions. But of course, as a young child, she was a little scared of it. And then they explained to her like what that was and why that was important. And I thought, like, what a beautiful thing to have been exposed to at such a young age instead of not explaining. And she's just like, wow, that's scary sounding. Or it not even happening, to see like this is a way of feeling and moving through something, because she then recognizes that life continued and they weren't in this like state of depression for an extended period of time. And now that as an adult she can go back and reflect on how powerful and potent that actually was as a practice. And what you said before, being well practiced, a lot of us just are not well practiced in some of these other experiences.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, and I think, I mean, grief is a really beautiful emotion. I mean, all emotions are beautiful. And the one thing that I would like asterisk that I've noticed in my own life is sometimes like there's a balance. You know, there's a balance between fully feeling an emotion and also like ruminating on it.
Yes.
Um, you know, and I was gonna say there's a difference between fully feeling an emotion and getting lost in it. But the thing is actually when you fully feel an emotion, when you're in it, you can feel a little lost. But then you always emerge out the other side. And there's a difference between that and ruminating on it. And so that would be like the little asterisk that I give is like, um, yeah, there's just um, there's something to just track in yourself
Yes.
as you like become more of an advanced practitioner in this
Yeah.
is like, do I feel like I'm circling in the same thing, or does it feel like I'm like going in and then coming out?
Yeah.
And that's more like the arc. That's typically the arc. Sometimes you can go in for a while,
Mm.
but you always come out the other side with clarity.
Yes.
Yeah, and that could take 2 minutes or 10 seconds. That could take an hour. That could take weeks. You know, if it's a really big thing. But are you finding that clarity or no?
I love that. Yeah, there's an app that I started using. It's called How We Feel. So if you go to howwefeel.org, which we'll put in the show notes as well, it's a center at Yale. They're studying emotions, and the app was designed by data scientists, engineers, and psychologists. And they're reframing the experience of feeling emotions, which most people, touchy feely woo woo, right? For a lot of people, as simply you're just collecting data to help you make more powerful decisions in your life. And so you get notified to check in, and that you get really granular because there's explanations. There's a color and a shape to each emotion: high energy, pleasant or unpleasant; low energy, pleasant or unpleasant. And then you start to name your experience, and you start to see just how varied your experience is. You start to notice patterns over time because you get all these fun little graphs. So if you're a data nerd like me and you like the graphs, then you get to see, and it helps you reframe. Because I remember last year after we did the eclipse, I had a really hard month, and I like crying in the closet, a hard month. And I then looked at the end of the month at my How I Feel app, and only 12% of my overall experience I had marked as unpleasant. And yet in my mind, I was like, that was one of the hardest months of my life. And it was like, I was crying, how embarrassing, and, all of these, again, stories of my experience. And then I look at the data and it's like, oh, I've checked in like 70 times this month and only 12% is unpleasant. Maybe it's not so bad, or, oh, that was only like two experiences out of hundreds that I had.
Yeah.
So actually, like things are pretty good. Okay, great. And then it was able to help me shift out of that rumination as well.
Yeah.
And
Totally.
it was, yeah, it sticks in my mind so powerfully because it was the first time that that happened so quickly. But it was because I had data to look at and assess of my own experience rather than, just like being in the thick of it and letting it
Yeah.
consume me.
Yeah. That's amazing. That's really cool. Yeah. And that's another skill as you develop all of these skills. Another really important skill that I think you're pointing to is like, how often does, something frustrating or upsetting happens at like 9 a.m. and then at 10 p.m. we're still upset about it, and then
Right.
like at like 10 a.m. the next day we're still upset about it,
Yeah.
and like actually letting yourself consciously have the state change. I mean, for me, some people are really good at getting over things quickly, and I will say that's not one of my learned skills. That's not one of my skills, and so this is something that I've worked on a lot. Is like, okay, one is like, how do we not get like crazy upset about things if like
Right.
something not so great happens? Like, how do we actually like have like thicker skin, see that no matter what, we're going to be okay. No matter what, everything's going to be good.
Yeah.
That's
Or
number one. And
equanimity
then number
towards what's
two is
happening. Right.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. It's like, it's also like less attachment to what's happening. Like
Yes.
this person can have an upset and like I can be totally fine.
Yes.
Um, and then the other thing is like, if I do get upset about something, how do I close the loop of how long I'm upset about it?
Hmm.
How do I make it so that I'm triggered? I'll use that word. Like I'm triggered for 15 minutes instead of 15 hours.
Right.
How
Shortening.
do I close exactly? How do I shorten the gap of me getting back to my center? And that's something that I've worked on with a lot of my clients. I'm working on that in my own life. And it's a really good skill to build for. And it's the other thing is like it may seem like it's for other people. Like it may seem like me getting back to center so that I'm not like cold shouldering my co-founder for a day. It may seem like it's for him, but it's actually for me too because it doesn't
Yeah.
feel good. It doesn't feel good to be in that place.
And it's not only that it doesn't feel good, it's actually detrimental for your health. I just finished reading
Yes.
Gabor Mate's book, When the Body Says No, The Hidden Costs of
Mm,
Stress.
hmm.
And my biggest takeaway from that book is that the best gift you can give to your children and to yourself is the gift of emotional resilience. Because all of this, and Gabor Mate started as a physician, right? He used to kind of look down on the Christine Northrups and when the body keeps the score and Louise Hayes and all of these types of, more of the somatic kind of symptoming. But now we have proven the mind body connection. And so he was talking about and he gave so many examples of people like who have MS, who have ALS, who have these breast cancer, all these kind of very common diseases and what their personality was like. And the things that the body's actually having stress, but maybe you're not categorizing it as stress because you're not like up here. Maybe your heart rate is still low, but your nervous system is under attack. And that's why this is so important because that emotional granularity helps you, one, have a better experience. Studies show that just studying positive psychology and emotions and having emotional granularity makes you a happier person just by studying it, just understanding it. But then also you're removing that stress that could literally cause you a life threatening dis-ease, right, in your body. So not only you're not feeling great, but then later in life you're having some major complications.
Yeah, and you know what's the craziest thing? And I wouldn't say that this is like an every single time this happens sort of thing, but there is data behind it. There's this thing, it's called the personality patterns, and there's like
Mm.
five or six of them. And basically Yeah, it's like for different developmental stages, like, you know,
Yes.
from like being in the womb, like embryonic, to like 0 to 6 months, to like 6 months to 2.5 years. I can link it in the chat as well, to like,
Yeah.
I think it's like 2.5 to 5. I'm currently studying it, so I don't feel like I can completely tell you exactly what it all is. But the fascinating thing is that based on your, I'm just going to use this word, based on your trauma, even if it's not intense, even if like we all have it, you know,
Yes.
so even if it's not like bad serious, you know, even if you were brought up in a loving
If it was
household,
little
like we
t,
all
not
have.
big T, right? There's little t
Exactly.
trauma and big T trauma.
Exactly, we all have it, but based upon like when you didn't get certain needs met, you know, like maybe you were like, you would reach for your mom because you needed to breastfeed and like she just wasn't available at that moment, or maybe you were like left in your bed in your crib and you were crying, you know, like based upon when that all happened. Maybe your mom was really stressed while you were in the womb.
Yeah,
There's actually like patterns in your body that can be predicted from that based upon like what
absolutely.
you learned and the coping mechanisms that you have. And so that's also the other interesting thing, is like, if you think about it, and I do this work with my clients a lot, like when we have certain emotional experiences, our body go into different shapes. So
Mhm.
like if I'm feeling like pissed at my colleague and I tend to get like a little avoidant, like I might, it's like my body sort of, if I follow the way my body wants to go, it might like turn me, you know, I might like sort of put my head down, my eyes down.
Yeah,
And like if we have enough of that emotional experience unprocessed in the body, then like your body actually might end up being slightly shifted like that. You know, you might walk around with your head slightly down. You
yeah.
know, you might be like less likely to make eye contact with people. And so it's like it all shows up physically as well, which is really a really interesting piece of this.
Absolutely. Yeah, the five personality patterns by Stephen Kessler. I've studied that before as
Yes.
well. And I mean, they talk about this in Landmark. They talk about this in a lot of different, when you study like self-determination theory and you understand what is actually intrinsically motivating people. You know, our personalities are a byproduct of the experiences we've been through and then the coping mechanisms we've adopted in order to like not feel a certain way again. And it's funny because like when we're reviewing these personality patterns, I can identify using all of them at some point, right? And so
Yeah.
it's like with any of these different models that exist. You know, we all exhibit traits of all of them, but we'll have like the dominant one or two that, as you mentioned, we can predict the behavior. It's just that pattern is going to repeat over and over and over. Doesn't matter what the event
Yeah.
is, but that's going to be the thing that happens. So yeah, so it's
Yeah.
super fascinating to dive into all of this stuff. And as we, go into talking about the power of the voice, and you mentioned, you know, having, I wrote it down. What did you say? You said trying to like, instead of holding back and like having this dissonance with ourself, right? And not
Hmm.
accepting something of ourself, the more we can understand our patterns, our emotional state, our needs and wants, and not just needs like food and water and things for survival, but what do you need in order to be able to show up and feel resourced, and like how do you
Yeah.
give that to yourself? Then our voices become so much more powerful because we're acting from that place of truth rather than that place of like I'm trying to prove something, right? And so then our voices
Yes.
become that much more powerful. What's your experience been like with that? I know you're moving more. I mean, you've done a lot of public speaking. You've been on stages a lot, but as you've been doing a lot of this other work and working
Yeah.
with these leaders and deepening your own practices, what have you noticed about your voice?
It's a good question. Um, so like we started in the beginning, the number one thing that made a difference for me on stage was me really getting in touch with my vision. You know, me getting in touch with my why, you know, and me letting myself feel that in my body rather than showing up. It's a loop it fully back. We're just talking about how fears can show up in your body. You
Yeah.
know, like if I go on stage and I'm like, I'm terrified, if I tend to be more avoidant, which I that is my system tends to be more avoidant, I might like show up and it's like my body wants to like curl inward on itself,
Yeah.
you know? And so then I would go up on stage and I might be like a little bit curled inward. I might be like really scared. I might like not be able to make eye contact with people versus like step one, acknowledging the fear. It's okay that
Mm,
it's here. Totally good. You know, I love that I have that fear and it's really just trying to protect me. Like it really is. Like it's like if you think about it from like a animal perspective,
Mm-hmm.
like it's like an animal that is like terrified of something like curling inward on itself is sort of like trying to like not expose the vulnerable parts of its body. You
Yeah.
know, it's like trying to like protect itself from the external. So it's actually like a deep, actually evolutionary intelligence. Um, and
Oh,
Shit.
you're back.
Uh,
You're back.
can
I
you
can
hear
hear
me?
you. Yes. Yeah.
My headphones just died.
That's all right.
Um, what do I click? I don't want to click refresh because then it's not going to save.
No, that's okay. We'll just keep going. I can hear you just fine.
Okay, is it still recording?
It's still recording.
Oh,
This is how we
great.
pivot with things that happen.
Okay, great. So hold on, let me just. It's just saying that my recording just stopped. So let me just like see if I can X out of that thing. It's telling me my recording just stopped.
It's telling you that your recording stopped.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna mark.
Hold on,
Okay,
let me
around
just get my
15
other pair of
minutes.
headphones.
No worries. I'm gonna just make a note on here. It's still recording on my side.
Yeah, I think it's not recording on my side.
Let me see.
And if I refresh,
Yeah, try refreshing and
yeah,
see what happens.
it says everyone else is still recording. Hold on, let me just get these headphones on. Sorry, I've not been easy to work with today.
That's all right. I made a note so they can go in and stitch it together.
Okay, great. Now I need to remember my train of thought. It's the next exciting challenge. Um,
And we do have 15 minutes left, so we'll just have to
okay, great. Just give me one
start to.
minute. Yeah, sorry, I feel like very unprofessional. I'm super sorry. Thank you for being patient with me.
You're welcome. It's okay. This is how life happens. It's totally fine.
Yeah, I know.
I wonder.
Everything's like slightly harder in Costa Rica.
It's okay. All right. You know what I'm going to do? I wonder if
What?
I stop my recording and then we start again, if it will redo for both of
Okay.
us. Let me try that.
Okay, great.